Hey, Jeff.
Hey.
Hello.
Hello. Right, do you want to kick us off?
Can we start first with the application blockers, application chart blockers at the top? Because I see a lot of things we say completed, and I would like to remove them if possible.
Yeah, that makes sense.
First item, use non-disk cache for cache. Jarv, this was done, right?
Yeah, we can remove that. Anything with completed in front of it, we can just remove.
Perfect. Love removing stuff.
We should also add.
Being worked on.
I'll
Go
add
ahead.
I was going to say I'll add the charts issue for the split services.
So the live trace is in production. First attempt at enabling this is nearly ready. The merge request is in review, and hopefully next week, even though Grzegorz is on vacation, next week we'll complete that first thing, which will give us a lot of insight where we are at, like what kind of new issues we'll see or not see, hopefully.
Do you know if is there like an acceptable amount of degradation that we'd take or to unlock other things, or does it need to be equal?
The problem with this feature specifically is that any sort of degradation is very feasible. So they'll need to find a way to make it performant or find a new architecture for it, because there is a level of expectation. So I think that refresh is every 10 seconds or something of the job logs. Anything up and down from that is not acceptable, basically.
Right. Okay.
But it's a good question. Support for dependency proxy. Well, this is a blocker, but we have a workaround, right? Support for dependency proxy.
No, we don't have a workaround. This isn't supported at all in the charts, so we can't migrate anything that depends on it until it's completed. Like there is the dependency proxy queue in catch-all, which we could migrate, I think, right now, but we can't because of this. And I think that might be it, but I'm not sure. Like anything that, I guess, like maybe the front end as well.
Okay. If nothing else, this is scheduled and it's added as a blocker, so let's see. I was not aware of this, honestly. Or rather, I didn't register it in my head. All right, removing NFS dependency for pages. I'll find the link and add it here. Scalability is taking on immediate action to unblock us from this one. So we are talking here about as soon as possible, if that makes sense, Jarv. We're not going to wait for a release or anything. It's going to be, as soon as it's ready, it's going to go out. We're going to test and see what happens and move on that way. So no scheduling or anything like that. Epic, and let's see this one. All right, this one needs to be scheduled. Okay, I'll take an action item for this one. Do we know exactly what we want to do, or did the conversation die down a bit?
I I have the video. I just haven't uploaded it yet. I'll do that after this meeting. But I put a lot of notes on the agenda if you want to check out. Basically, we all just sort of nodded our heads on the path forward, which is that we're going to split the chart for web services into multiple services that will each have their own load balancer, which will allow us to do the routing in HA proxy. Jason estimated that it'll probably take about a week of engineering work, but it needs to be scheduled first.
All right, I'll take an action item for scheduling. When you have the record and uploaded, I'm curious to see how the discussion went.
I'll ping you.
Cool. Any other blocker that we can think of at this very moment? All right. Reminder before we go further, it's our Q3 OKR, but it's not only that it's our Q3 OKR, it's a direct feed into a multi-large working group. It has like direct visibility and support of, well, the whole company now, luckily. So we are in a good situation, I think. I mean, no pressure to everyone in this call. I'm just saying it's a better situation than a couple of months ago where I was trying to gather support alone. So, all right, Skarbek, let's talk about things.
Okay, I just wanted to share kind of the plan of action based on last week's meeting and just kind of go over just to make sure that we're all on the same page and we're all on board. Whoops, I don't know what I hit. But I populated the epic with a bunch of issues that I think we'll want to tackle. So right now, I didn't put myself on this, but right now I'm identifying all the queue owners and I'm going to spin up an issue, basically just asking people, do we depend on shared storage? Tell me yes or no. I was going to put all the queues in that list, even ones that we're not going to migrate, such as the cron jobs and the pages one and dependency proxy and such. But you know, it's just gathering information. While we're waiting on people to respond to that, we could go ahead and create the new Sidekick fleet. We're still going to mount NFS to these boxes. And the goal here is that we would use a script written by somebody, whether that be Andrew or Jarv or me, to basically monitor for NFS usage in tandem with metrics. And as we gather that information, we'll figure out which queue that is operating on, and we'll simply push that queue back to the catch-all fleet as necessary. Once we've isolated all the queues, I figured we could start pushing things into Kubernetes, and I created an issue for that as well. The prerequisite that is removing NFS as a stopgap, just to confirm that we don't have anything else that's writing. My assumption here is that we would spin up a completely identical fleet. So we would have Sidekick catch NFS or Sidekick catch 2, whatever. And it would just move all the queues. I don't know how to do this in our chef roles at the moment in time, but I figure we'd just move all the individual queues over and then migrate them back over to the original catch-all fleet as we deem them not safe to migrate over into Kubernetes. I don't know if I should do this in batches, because I imagine if I move, there's 244 queues on this fleet. I imagine if I try to move, say, 200 of them, that would be painful. It'd be very difficult to figure certain things out. And with the desire to run a concurrency level 1 to make it easier to investigate, that would cause a little pain, because that queue or that set of fleet would drive up our metrics, and we would probably violate some SLAs if we did it that way.
But we would keep the same jobs running on the normal catch-all fleet. We wouldn't exclusively run them there.
Okay, so we're duplicating.
So it wouldn't affect it. Yeah, it wouldn't affect the SLAs. And I think that's one of the nice things about it, is that it's a safe. And also, if it all goes horribly wrong, or BPF like slows the machine down too much or anything, it doesn't matter, because there's always the old fleet to pick up those jobs. That was my
okay. So no changes to catch-all. This is just duplicating the new. Okay.
Yeah,
that makes sense to me.
And
okay.
The problem there is for very low RPS jobs, there's obviously 8 nodes with high concurrency, and they'll take most of those jobs. So it's unlikely that those will run on the concurrency 1 fleet. So we might have to kind of, but the other thing is, Jakob brought up something in the last meeting, and I'd totally forgotten about it. It was something we did with GitLab when we were trying to shut off NFS for GitLab like 2 years ago maybe. And we had exactly the same problem. We were like, what's going to break? And what we did was we basically used Sentry to report the stack trace, the full stack trace of where, whenever code was asking for the location of the place to write, you know, like the code's going to go, I need to write to NFS. So the first thing it does is it goes and gets the location from settings. So it's like, get me the shared folder. And whenever you do that, we send an event to Sentry, like a kind of a soft exception. Obviously, it's not a real exception. And then in Sentry, you get all of those stack traces and you can do some analysis. And it's quite a boring solution, and it worked very well for GitLab. Obviously, there are downsides, and you've got to do it slowly so they don't swamp Sentry, but we did do it successfully with GitLab.
I added the merge request link to the agenda if you want to check it out. Because Jakob is doing the same thing with pages. Sorry, Jared, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, one reason why this may be more difficult, Andrew, is that this shared directory may be used for more than just sharing state between the front and the back end.
Yeah.
It might be harder to differentiate. Where on the front end with pages, it's very clear, you know.
Yeah, and also for GitLab, it was like the only reason you want to get the location of a GitLab shard is to like do stuff. So yeah, exactly. It was, yeah. And it's, and a lot of stuff we'll use, but I think it's all about kind of differentiating between, like as a first step, the jobs that don't have any file system access. And then, you know, if that's 70% of the jobs, which my guess would be somewhere close to that, or higher, then you're just kind of shrinking the set, right? So, you know, it might not give you everything, but it'll certainly give you the ones that don't do any file system access. And you can have quite fine-grained control, like you could turn it on a single catch-all machine, you know, if there was an environment variable, and let it run there. And, you know, if Sentry started shaking. I mean, actually, to be honest, whenever I look at the metrics, Sentry is like near the end. So we'd have to be a little bit careful with it, but that should be fixed independently of this anyway.
Yeah, I would love to go this way as well. I'm just afraid whether we can actually pull it off effectively here, because there is a difference here. We're talking about Jakob, who has a deep understanding and knowledge of the application, right? We have more of an understanding of the supporting infrastructure from this side. Yeah. So I think that might be a better approach in the end. I was thinking about it like between the demos now. And if Jakob was doing it, then I would be more confident that we should do it this way, because he will be able to like make a distinction between all the cases inside of the application that we have. I think we have a path forward with the infrastructure side of things, and that I think we should leverage it.
The one real big advantage of the Sentry approach is that you get a stack trace. So you literally get the pointer to exactly where the problem is, which is really nice, because with the other approach, we don't have that. We've got to kind of then do the investigation afterwards.
Right, but that's not what we are set out to do here today, now, yeah, right? True. That's the difference, right? Like Jakob wants to go and fix the application code, so that helps him. Yeah, we are only wanting to isolate it so that we don't damage things. So that can be makes sense. A second step maybe, when we decide that it's time to remove all Sidekick VMs. Yeah. Cool. Or unless Scarpe feels adventurous to go into GitLab codebase and try to do this himself.
My ability to do that would be very dangerous.
Well, you would be raising exceptions, then mission accomplished, right?
You're not actually raising. All you need to do is just do a Raven, like there's a Raven Sentry client, and just put a fake exception to Raven. But yeah, I know what you mean. It's a different skill set, right?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. But
So
yeah.
concurrency-wise, Scarbeck, you mentioned you don't want to put 200 queues at once. Did you like try to figure out like whether there is any grouping that you can do per, instead of like picking out random queues, but say like per feature category? So everything that is prefixed with pipelines, you'll just not do, or leave
I
it
haven't looked
behind?
into that yet, but what I was kind of thinking about is maybe doing this in a team organized manner. So I've already got a script that's telling me who owns what queues, but maybe taking all the queues owned by a specific team and putting those grouped together. But I haven't done the math to see how many queues that would kind of add up into, like, or how many batches of queues that might be. So no, I have not planned that far ahead. Because there's 244, there's going to be some that we don't want to migrate. Maybe I'll just do this in groups of like 50 at a time, just to evaluate and see what happens. I don't know how long this will take though, which is my problem with this.
Well, this, like, we're now not talking about the speed of it, we're talking about safety of it, actually. So
And doing it in slow batches will definitely provide us with, I feel, enough safety to move forward. But if this is an OKR and that's going to stress us out, I don't know.
I mean, it's going to stress us out anyway, but you have help from Jarv, and Jarv can also help out with taking some of the items off. So 240 divided by 2, that's already manageable, people, right?
Precisely.
Exactly.
I'll help out with the RCA too.
Thanks.
Great. No, but consider, instead of, like, if you have the script already for the team, that's fine. I would consider having, like, if that doesn't work out, consider having grouping by feature category itself.
Okay.
Because that theoretically should have similar-ish workloads. And given that it's probably written by the same people, probably same habits. So some will be 2 queues long, some will be 22, but it will give you a bit of an idea. Do you need any additional help from anyone else, Scarbeck? Like, do you want us to involve someone from the rest of the team on the application side?
At this moment in time, I'm still gathering information. So I think as long as I'm able to proceed with that, I'll call on people as necessary. So if you want me to hit you up, or maybe I could hit Amy up and figure out what unblocks me, I'll definitely let you know. But at this moment in time, I'm still just gathering information. So
Awesome. Cool.
if anything, Jarv and Andrew, if you want to make sure that my plan, all the issues, like, they don't have any implementation details, they're just very broad, here's the plan of action issues. If you could at least go through the epic just to make sure that I'm not doing something dumb, that would be helpful. All right, Jarv, you're up.
Sure, I just wanted to spend a quick moment here going through the migration blockers that we didn't talk about that are labeled. It looks like we have everything covered, and it's looking pretty good. I just noticed that there's some issues here that maybe aren't blockers. For example, the custom metric for HPA, this is something we talked about pretty early on and something that we want, but I don't know if it's a blocker. Like, I think it's kind of a big change. Do you agree? I mean, we're already moving forward with Sidekick without this, so I vote that we remove the label.
I don't think it's a blocker. I think it's a very, very nice to have. This would make scaling the HPAs a lot easier, but I don't think this should prevent us from moving anything over into Kubernetes. We already have one queue that does not operate with an HPA, and based on an issue that popped in overnight, I need to stop the work that I'm currently doing with the urgent CPU bound queue. So, like, we could always lock how many pods we're running using custom metrics. I think it's just a nice to have.
Yeah, I tend to agree. So let's remove it then. The temp file issue, I think this is something you put in a while ago, and we've learned a lot since this issue was submitted. I'm not aware of any places where we're building up files other than project exports. I guess project downloads as well. But we're
But
kind of
are we
working around.
monitoring for that stuff though?
No, we're not. I mean, we basically are just relying on emptydir right now. My point here is that I don't know if it's a migration blocker because we've already decided to deal with this. So maybe it's not. You should just remove the label.
If you're okay with that, I'm going to remove it then, but I'll add production requests to it just so we can keep track on it because I'm subscribed to that label.
That sounds good. And then this Sidekick signal propagation, which is also a fairly old issue. And I think Skarbek, you did a lot of work on this. And I think we should close this, right? Based on the last comments?
This is really old.
Yeah.
I don't think we should close this issue. I think we should let distribution take care of it, but maybe we could remove the blocker on it because I feel like we're in an okay spot right now.
There are no known issues with this. Like, as far as I know, like,
yeah.
You don't have any. Okay. But yeah, I think we can then remove the label. All right, so for the next one, this could have been a demo actually, because I started on this idea of having an alternate cluster that Marin opened a week ago. And the idea here is that in the situation where we do a Kubernetes upgrade and things are really bad, we need a way to roll back the cluster. Or if there's something wrong with the cluster itself, we need a way to possibly spin up a new cluster. I think what Marin was asking for here was try to like scope out what would be necessary to make this work. Like, we're not going to probably spend a whole lot of time on this, but where I'm currently sitting on this is that I'm thinking of the idea of having a shadow cluster per environment, which we would like be able to probably spin up and down easily, would probably remain, like, would be in our pipeline permanently, but would just be a no-op if it's not there. So like we would have like a shadow pipeline or shadow cluster per environment that would just be skipped over if it doesn't exist. And then whenever we want to spin it up, we just spin it up and it would be available for us. So this is kind of what I was assuming or what I was thinking going into this. I spun up a duplicate cluster in pre-prod. I found some issues with that already, but they're fixed. So I think we know now that we can at least spin up the infrastructure, like the carbon copy infrastructure in an environment. The tricky part is getting it configured. I kind of like put a quick summary here about like, you know, what I think the issues will be. First, on the infrastructure side, it's really just a copy of the cluster.
Hey,
we do, yes.
I just see your desktop, by the way.
Oh, sorry about that. Must have shared the wrong thing. There we go. So for this, I'm thinking that I was thinking that we would just duplicate, make one cluster, two clusters. Of course, that we have like a little bit more than just the cluster defined. For example, you know, the plant UML DNS entry and all that stuff. I think this is kind of lower priority, like, anyway, we can duplicate all of this stuff. So the infrastructure side, I think, is pretty simple. At first, I was thinking we could just put a count on the module in Terraform. But this is not going to work just because, like, we're not using a count now, and it's just going to require a lot of refactoring, and to keep it backwards compatible with what we have is a mess. Then the idea would be to ensure that like everything is working, but doesn't receive any traffic. For the front-end service, this is easy. Registry, it's like you just don't add it to HA proxy, or you control it at HA proxy. For mailroom and Sidekick, it's a bit trickier. Like we're going to have to ensure that we don't have any replicas for those services and make sure that we don't have any replicas right off the bat. This is sort of what this is what I'm kind of on right now. Actually, what I'm on right now is trying to configure the second shadow cluster and, you know, making sure our tooling, you know, is able to do that. Skyrock, do you have any thoughts on this before like I continue with it?
I like this idea. That's my only thought at the moment in time.
Okay, well, then if you think it's something, like I wasn't sure it was worth spending time on initially, but now that I'm kind of gathering my thoughts, I'm thinking like, maybe we can just time box it and see how far we get.
Is there like, what's the impact of us not having like it not being a like for like environment? Like, does that make it significantly less useful?
Yeah, I mean, I think the real tricky thing is that we tie so much of our config to the environment. So I don't think we could easily spin up a cluster in a different environment and then just attach it to production. So it needs to be like it needs to be in the same environment. And also this affects metrics as well. Like all of our relabeling and dashboards, they all key off of environment and stage and all these things. So all of these labels would need to be consistent. So I think having a shadow cluster within this environment probably is going to make this the easiest. Does that answer your question, Amy?
Yeah, it sort of does. Like, we still like wouldn't end up with like a like for like staging though, right? If I answered what you said correctly. So the new one wouldn't be an exact replica of the existing staging. Is that right?
It would be a replica in the sense that it would be another cluster in the staging environment that is configured exactly the same, with the same pods configured, using the same secrets, using the same version. But the only difference would be the Kubernetes cluster. Like we could maybe have like 2 different versions of Kubernetes running in the same environment.
Right. Okay. Yeah, makes sense.
So basically, what I'm interested to find out is that if we do this like this, say you decide to upgrade to the next version of Kubernetes, you'll be able to do that and just shift traffic and it will still work as expected. That would be the only difference, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think
that's all we need right now.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious what Google's going to come back with when we meet with them to talk about Kubernetes upgrades. I mean, maybe that'll have an effect on, you know, whether we think this is, you know, going to be worthwhile or not. Yeah, but yeah, I think the k8s upgrades is probably the main driving factor here.
Yeah, that makes sense. And for context for everyone else, I'll add it to the next, but Google have, I expect they're going to come back with some fairly fundamental stuff for us, because their proposal was that they want to give us an hour-long introduction to architecture. So
that's useless. We're going to just sit there and nod our heads. We actually need someone who's going to help us out. I mean, they can do that. Sure, it might be useful for the rest of the team, but I think for people here in this call, it's probably just going to be like, oh, okay, I can scroll through this.
That's fair enough. Yeah.
But it's, again, if they want to do this first to ensure that, I don't know, we are on the same level, sure. I think there are people outside of this call in the team that want to know more. But I'm more curious if they actually want to help us out. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't need a product pitch of, oh, Kubernetes upgrades are safe. Sure, yes, we know.
Exactly.
But what if they're not?
Yeah,
that's what
absolutely.
we want to find out. Cool, Jar. I like this idea. I would like to, like, when you ever get to the point where we can test these things, I would actually like to see us run on 2 different versions of Kubernetes and take production traffic. I'm not trying to do federated GitLab of any sort or anything like that, but I just want to verify that we're able to, you know, in a moment of incident or anything like that, have something to at least try.
Yeah, I mean, it would be like it'd be the nicest if there was just like a clone option from the console, right? And that would not only clone the infrastructure, but also clone all of the config as well.
Yeah.
I'll ask Google, see if that's coming. That would be the nicest way, because then then it would just be all like we would just clone it, and because I don't think we really care so much about deploying to it, you know, like on a regular basis. We just need something to, we just need to clone it, and yeah. So yeah. Cool.
Cool. I like this approach. Thanks for
Right.
for laying it out.
And I think we're at the end. Does anyone have anything else? Okay, that's it. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Have a good weekend.